this video, I'm going to tell you 6 design mistakes that are making you feel sad in your home. What are the important things that we should look out for when we're designing our homes or looking for our next place to live to avoid feeling our worst and feeling down in our space? As major cities continue to develop and become more populated, more and more multi-residential towers are being built to provide living spaces for these people. So if we're looking at our typical multi-residential tower, you usually have the main circulation core, so things like elevators and exit stairs, are typically placed in the center of the building. And then the suites are then designed along the exterior perimeter of this building area to obviously take advantage of the views to the outdoors. But the problem that I'm seeing is that to increase the efficiency of the floor plan, to take advantage of fitting as many suites along the perimeter edge as possible, we see these long, narrow floor plans for each unit. These layouts aren't really an issue because they might make you feel claustrophobic or anything, but actually it's because in these units, there tend to only be windows at one far end of the unit, which means that there's no natural light coming in at the other further end, in the other half of the unit. Rooms that are lit from one side tend to make us feel more negative. This is because when we have light coming from one side only, there tends to be much more glare and much more harsher contrast in the area, and many more darker shadowed areas that tend to make us feel more restricted and claustrophobic. So what can we do to change this? Well, if the shape of our allowable building area provides, we can build a floor plan with much more shallow room plans with an increased number of windows along the long perimeter of the floor plan. This will allow much more light to come in and then also possibly bounce off the walls to reflect back into the room space. And having more light distributed in the area will in turn make the space feel much more comfortable and pleasant. Another option that we have is to design spaces with much higher ceilings to allow for a lot more natural light to come into the space. Buildings built in the Victorian era were built like this because most of that time period they didn't have electricity, so they needed a lot of natural light to come in. The super large windows allowed for a lot of natural light to come in into every corner of the space. But in reality, higher ceilings would mean that a lot of potential building area volume would be wasted. So what's another solution? Well, if you can't change the current architectural layout of your space or go knocking down your neighbor's walls to allow more light into your space, there are a few tricks you can do to allow more natural light into your space. Include mirrors and a lot of reflective surfaces in your apartment decor to reflect a lot of light back into your space and potentially hit the darker, more shadowed areas within your home. So this can be furniture pieces with metallic finishes, even like a polished stone on top, or a lot of glass included in your furniture to help reflect and bounce around the light. Also, having a lot of light colored surfaces helps with reflecting light. White or pastel walls can really brighten up your space. This brings me to the next item on the list. Furniture nowadays is being built much more differently than the type of furniture that my parents and grandparents had. I'm sure you can all see this as well. Their furniture seems to be super sturdy, it lasts a long time, and it's usually made from solid wood and real materials. These days, synthetic materials are becoming much more popular in furniture making due to their affordability. But I think we're also forgetting that natural materials provide much more value than just through their aesthetics, but we also get much more satisfying and positive emotions through touching these natural materials. The Journal of Environmental Psychology found that natural materials actually induce a sense of calmness and positive emotions among people. The act of touching natural materials can engage sensory responses, helping to calm the mind and body by activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of the rest and digest response. This in turn lowers our stress hormone cortisol and increases our feel-good hormones like serotonin and dopamine. I mean, most people naturally love to spend time in nature. It's the look and also the feel of these natural materials in nature that make us feel so calm when we're outdoors. So what's in your home? What's on your floors? And what are your fabrics and materials made of? Having natural and real materials in your home also doesn't have to be pricey. You can get smaller scale items with natural materials, things like wood side tables, benches, decorative stone bowls, ceramics, and linen bed sheets are some ideas. Also, try thrifting or getting these pieces secondhand from a marketplace. That's where I've actually gotten a lot of pieces in my home, like this marble coffee table and these wooden dining chairs that I'm going to sand and refinish. Some other natural materials that you can also find for pieces in your home other than wood are stone, marble, clay, cork, linen, jute. Even try to have dried flowers or stems in your space. It can really brighten up the mood in your space. It can also be a good idea to furnish items in your home that remind you of nature. Things like brown, sandy beiges, wine reds, green, blues. And do you ever notice how bright colors or a lot of patterns tend to happen only in little pops in nature? This is because they usually signify something dangerous and really catch our attention. So just keep this in mind if you don't want your place to feel too overwhelming. Use these bright colors and patterns in little accent pieces and pops throughout your home. For years, contractors and real estate agents have said that if you're looking to buy or rent a new space, higher vaulted ceilings are the best way to go. Well, are they right? The psychological effect of lower ceilings make people feel more intimate, cozy, and closer to one another because there's less room in the space. On the other hand, higher ceilings are typically reserved for spaces that hold formal events. Places that commonly have higher ceilings are things like churches, formal halls, public libraries, entryways or foyers to hotels or palaces. These spaces are also places where we kind of need to behave and act more formal. So are high ceilings really ideal for people's homes? It's actually found that it's not high ceilings or low ceilings that are the best, but it's a variation in ceiling heights that makes people feel their best in a building. It's not the absolute height of a room that matters, but rather the variation in height between rooms within a building. We associate different levels of intimacy with different ceiling heights and choose the appropriate rooms accordingly. Well, how does this work? Well, let's say if you're having a large gathering of people in your home, maybe you want to have it in the formal living room or a dining room because it might feel a bit more formal. In this space, you would have higher ceilings to give off that luxurious formal effect. But after the party, when your guests have left and it's kind of just you and your partner, you might want to move to a more intimate space where you can sit down on a sofa, have a glass of wine, and kind of talk about how the party went. This place would probably have lower ceilings to make the space feel more intimate and cozy. All these subtle height changes in a building give us subconscious clues of how we should behave in a space. If we want to be able to express a full range of emotions and have different levels of comfort, we should have spaces for these behaviors and emotions. Some spaces that are more public and grand, and some spaces that are more intimate and private. Take a look at these ceiling heights and spaces and tell me how you would probably behave in these spaces. Public reception areas, train stations, a canopy bed, a reading nook. If your home or office is lit like this, well, that feels pretty depressing. This type of uniform fluorescent lighting is designed specifically to keep people alert, awake, and keep working like we're robots. It's not really designed for human needs. Uniform lighting like this makes a space feel very flat, and it's an attempt to mimic the natural daylighting that happens outdoors, since that is what actually keeps people awake and alert. But in reality, this isn't how natural daylighting behaves anyways. Natural lighting outdoors has areas of shadows. It also has dapples of light falling through trees and leaves. Sometimes natural light outdoors is very bright, but at other times it transitions into more diffused light through clouds. And you can really see how outdoor lighting really changes in intensity throughout the day. This is an important characteristic to distinguish from natural light and uniform lighting like this. We need to create different zones of light throughout a space to create spaces for people to gather around in. Pooling light in certain areas is also commonly used in different contexts, restaurants, reading corners, and at the dining table in your home. So what can we do to create different zones of light? Turn off your ceiling light and create different areas of lighting depending on what you'll be doing in these different zones. There might be a zone by an accent chair where you read your book, another zone of light by the couch, and maybe a sconce lighting above an art piece on the wall, and then maybe another source of lighting on the bookshelf in your corner. Having this different variation in zones of light is meant to create a more pleasant atmosphere. Speaking of lights, there's not much else to light other than that they're either dim or bright. Well, that's missing a few things. Light bulbs might not be the first thing you think of when it comes to the topic of color, but brightness is just one thing that you need to think of when it comes to choosing a light bulb. Do you notice that we tend to be much happier when we spend time in warm colors? But why is this? After all, humans like to spend time outdoors, and outdoors the sky is blue, the grass is green, which are both typically cool colors. Well, whether we like to spend time around cool colors actually depends on the temperature of colors in that space. And this can be affected by the temperature of light in that space. But another thing to think about is also the color tones of the colors in that space. Look at these two colors of gray. This is a warm toned gray and this is a cool toned gray. Most people will feel better in a room that is painted with the warm toned gray, as it feels more inviting and comforting to be in. We can still use cool toned colors in the space, but I think it's also important to think of what other colors and temperatures that they're combined with. Look at the finishes that you have in a room, and if you have mostly warm wood floors, warm colored tiles, then maybe a cool colored wall tile would still feel comfortable in that space. If your floors are finished with a cooler color like grays and cool browns, I would probably stick with warm colors in that specific space. With the price of rent and the cost of homes increasing rapidly, many people are forced to live in smaller homes in less square footage than they would typically like to. To find out the tips and tricks of how to use your space more efficiently and to create a sense of a larger space in your small home, you can watch this video that I created about 5 design tips for small homes and how to get the most out of your small space.